Okay, now let's talk about the
Second issue?
second issue.
Second issue has to do with the potential for reimbursement of costs that are incurred by the City of Moscow, mainly in the police department area, for additional services that are occasioned by the movement of these over-legal loads through our city. If you look on the last page of the packet of information that you have before you, you'll see a memorandum from Chief Duke. Asked the chief early on to keep records of staff who were present at these over-legal loads moving through town, and to keep records on additional costs occasioned by that, meaning if he had to bring people in off hours, perhaps expend overtime budgets. In addition, the command staff, being exempt employees, are not compensated additionally for being out there helping out as these over-legal loads are moving through town. Okay, so the accounting is in your packets. Additionally, we have been asked a couple of times by representatives of the Idaho State Police, who you'll also see a simile of a contract that Mammoet, who is the hauler of these Curl Oil Sands loads, has with the Idaho State Police. Darren Bland, who is the manager or project manager of the transport of those loads, saw me stop by my office about 3 weeks ago and brought that simile of that contract with him, indicating that that is the agreement that Mammoet USA has with the Idaho State Police and with Montana State Patrol, and indicated that they would be willing to enter into a contract similar to that with the City of Moscow. Told him that at this time, the issue could be brought before the council, and this is not the first time the issue has come up. As I indicated, ISP has indicated in the past that they thought that perhaps the city could be paid for those additional costs. Reimbursed. Okay. So that's where we are today. Indicated to Mr. Bland that the council would be taking up that discussion. You have an additional set of information that the mayor gave you in a memorandum regarding her thoughts on the issue of reimbursement. Staff's recommendation is that does not appear to be a necessity for any sort of memorandum at this time. If you look at the agreement with the Idaho State Police, it does obligate the state police to be providing certain services, which in our case, the chief can certainly speak for himself, but in our many discussions about police presence during the movement of these over-legal loads, the main concern has been public safety, and the chief determines what response or what police presence from the Moscow police will be utilized based on his assessment of the necessity, depending on the load, depending on whatever intelligence that he has gathered, so on and so forth. So it would seem, and I shared this with the city attorney, and it is our opinion, and he can certainly speak for himself as well, that it does not appear there needs to be a contract at this time. Mr. Bland, as I discussed with him, if the city did not desire to enter into a contract, it might be possible, if the council approved, to submit accounting of those additional costs, and then if Mammoet wanted to reimburse the city at that time, they could, but we would be in no way beholden to Mammoet in the police response to those over-legal loads coming through. It has also been discussed, and if you look at the different potentials that are in your agenda, it may also be a potential to, since the Idaho State Police is already under contract with Mammoet, and the chief can talk a little bit about the Moscow police response, which is in part based upon direction from the Idaho State Police, and that is the Idaho State Police might call up and say, hey, got this load coming through, we'd appreciate some assistance. There were a couple of loads that moved through the city last week where the Idaho State Police indicated they did not see the need for any assistance. Of course, there was our on-duty officers were present, and also there was an incident where they were called upon to help clear the roadway. So that's where we are today. There are some different potentials. The first is not seek any reimbursement. Second is to seek reimbursement from Mammut on a cost accounting basis without a contract. That would be staff's recommendation if the council chooses to go that way. Or 3, seek reimbursement through the Idaho State Police. And I'd invite the chief's comments if the committee would like to hear them.
Chief, do you have anything to add at this time?
We're currently working with the Idaho State Police to set up a standardization of response. That was one of the things that has troubled my staff, myself, is as these loads come through, there is no set protocols. Once those are in place and recommendations at a meeting we had with all the partners today down in Lewiston was to expedite these loads through Moscow and that they no longer have an impact. I guess my recommendation is public safety first. I do have to work within a budget, but the budget itself is nothing that will take a priority over staffing levels. I will ensure that those officers and our mutual aid partners out there have the resources they need. I do still have to follow the Idaho State Police in this, that we are working as an assisting agency. I believe that was resolved today as far as what's going on, that if any more of these loads come through, we will have an additional visibility and staffing support to handle up to a certain amount of problems that might arise. But in itself, this is escalating, and we need to take action to de-escalate it the best we can. As far as reimbursement, my recommendation is to go with staff. We seek it through after the fact, and just to let people know I don't get paid by Mammut if the money comes in, which has been speculated that I receive a check and distribute it out. It is paid to the city of Moscow and does not even come across our department. It goes into the general fund revenues, and that there is no partiality that will be done on this. What impacts the city is as a result of your decision and recommendations of who should seek this. It has been the police department's practice that anyone that comes to us and seeks additional support, we will examine it, and there is a set process for seeking reimbursement for hours worked, and we do that with most organizations around here that have special events. So this is nothing new. It's just within its new self, maybe a perception that is reimbursing because of the political aspects that have been played out in the last 2 months.
Gary.
I would note, as the chief indicated, you see this whenever we rendezvous comes before you every year. The requirement is that they have some sort of security. They're free to use Moscow Police Department at the rates that the city or the council has approved in the fee resolution. They've chosen, and the council's approved, some private security in that case. So it's not without precedent. However, it is a little different.
Just to clarify, they are free to use the police at the fee, but they don't pay the police department. They pay the city. It goes into the general fund.
Exactly. It goes through our typical process. No monies that are paid to the police stay in the police department.
It doesn't.
From parking
Nothing is
fines
direct.
to dog tickets, they all go through
Right.
a process and end up in the general fund and are accounted for there. This is a little bit different in that the council has approved, of course, the rendezvous event, and staff takes a recommendation and says this is the staffing level we're requiring. That is not the case here. This is the case where the chief assesses the risk and responds to that with his personnel, and that's why we prefer the seeking reimbursement. We're certainly, if the council desires, staff will certainly seek reimbursement, but I doubt you want to do that in a prospective fashion under the requirements of a contract.
Tim, you had something.
I do, thanks. If we go the reimbursement route, is it reimbursement after the additional law enforcement is no longer required, or is it reimbursement per event?
That is a detail that would have to be worked out. Again, I've not had a discussion with Mr. Bland as far as whether they would even entertain an accounting type reimbursement. So we'd have to explore that. And if you've got a preference, I'd certainly like to hear it.
Go ahead, Tim.
I'd prefer per event, to answer your question back. Is the city aware of any other municipalities along the route, whether it be 12 or 95, that is looking at similar reimbursement?
In our discussions today, Moscow is the only one that has had any incidences that have caused this load to deviate from its traffic control plan. There are no other jurisdictions along the route in Idaho or Montana that have caused any problems, and that does include Missoula.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just thank
Continue.
you. I don't know how far out in left field this is, but I'm going to pitch it in anyhow. We're looking at the possibility of reimbursement for the police services, but prior to the first loads coming through, I know Parks and Rec spent a lot of time with the tree trimming effort. The street supervisor looked at the possible deterioration of the sewer and water line and the highway. I know admin has spent a lot of time getting these things put together. Is it unreasonable to assume that we have additional costs besides just the ones that the law enforcement are incurring?